Hello, everybody. We'll be getting started shortly. We're just waiting for a few other participants to join as they're doing now. So we'll get started in about 30 seconds or so. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. We're just waiting a few more seconds to see if there are other participants joining. It looks like there are. Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Okay, hello, everybody, and good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on which part of the world you are joining us from. My name is Rich Fernandez. I'm the CEO of the Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute, and we are so happy today to be able to present you the findings of our first ever survey of emotional intelligence, the state of emotional intelligence in this year, 2020. So we have a lot of good information for you. And again, welcome wherever you're joining from. This session will also be recorded, so you can refer to it afterwards, and we'll also be sending it to all participants who registered if they haven't been able to join for whatever reason this morning. And again, I'm Rich Fernandez, and I'd love to hear from you, actually. If you could use the chat bar, some of you have already done that, and let us know where you are joining us from. It would be great to see. And if I'd invite everybody to take a look, we have Bhutan, hello Yashi, and Miami, Indonesia, Mexico, Saudi Arabia, wow, Sao Paulo, hello, Cape Town, South Africa, beautiful, Croatia, Brazil, wonderful. And some of you I know, which is wonderful to see. Those I don't, welcome, Amsterdam, right here in San Francisco, welcome. Flint, Michigan, wonderful. Costa Rica, Chile, wonderful. So welcome, and I love the global representation here. And if you're just joining, please just text us or chat us, sorry. Use the chat bar and let us know where you're joining us from. And you could all take a look at that. It's always great to see how far and wide interest is in these topics of mindfulness and emotional intelligence. So it's wonderful to see that in the chat. Welcome again. And I'm Rich, and I'm here at the Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute. We're based in San Francisco, though we have team members all over the world. If you're not familiar with our institute, I just wanted to spend a few seconds and share with you that we, as you see here, utilize the core approaches of neuroscience, mindfulness, and emotional intelligence to really foster leadership and to unlock potential. Both at work and outside of work in life. We originated at Google. This was a training platform that was developed at Google. I formerly worked at Google as the head of executive education, and it became wildly popular within Google such that we spun it off and got permission to spin Search Inside Yourself off as a separate leadership institute that exists today as a nonprofit educational institute. We operate in over 50 countries around the world. I think you'll see some of that evidenced in the responses we got from all over the world. And again, as you see here, our core approach is to harness neuroscience and utilize the practices of mindfulness to build the skills of emotional intelligence for work and life. So that's a little bit about us. And if you are familiar with us, you know that part of what we do is we like to enable people with ways to practice these skills. And that happens at a direct experiential level. And so that's what we would love to invite you to do now, just for a few moments. Whether you are familiar with this practice or not, we would like to invite you to a practice that we call a minute to arrive, meaning that we're taking a minute or a few moments at least to simply arrive with our minds and our hearts and our bodies all in the same present moment, to collect our scattered focus and just bring it to this present moment. So however you find yourself sitting or standing or lying down, I'd invite you to soften your gaze, closing your eyes if you like, and just bring gentle attention to your breathing. Just becoming aware of your breath as it comes in and out of your body. Anchoring your attention for just a moment on your breath. Perhaps gathering and collecting your attention. Pausing for a moment as we harness this skill of attention. And just check in with yourself also. Notice the quality of your thoughts, perhaps. No judgment, but just noticing, how are you doing in this moment? Taking a few last breaths. And then as you're ready, you can rejoin the group. And with that, I thank you for your attention. We always like to do that in the beginning of our work because one of the things we work with is attention. And too often these days we find our attention scattered. We can talk more about that at some other point, or if you attend one of our programs or have. But for now, I would like to invite us to continue to kind of explore this topic. And the reason that many of you may also be familiar that we do these practices and offer these sets of skills is because of what we call the VUCA world. Many of you may be familiar with this, but it's pretty intuitive that the world is kind of in a VUCA state, which is a volatile state, where there's a lot of uncertainty. It's complex. The factors that contribute to this state of things are very complex and also ambiguous. A lot of these solutions, some of the problems themselves and the root causes of those problems are ambiguous. So together, the volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world we inhabit is part of the reason why these skills of mindfulness and emotional intelligence are more important, and perhaps more important now than ever, because the VUCA world is in full effect. As we know, we're also in the middle of like vast changes and challenges in the world, from the global pandemic to economic and social crises, climate crises. So it can be quite overwhelming. And that is one of the reasons why we really want to focus on these skills. We are seeing here at the Institute an unprecedented level of interest in the skills of mindfulness and emotional intelligence. And so that's part of what informs our approach today, and that we wanted to assess, what is the state of emotional intelligence out there. But before we even do that, one of our core premises is that emotional intelligence contributes to great leadership. But rather than tell you that, we'd be curious to ask you that. And what we'd like to invite you to do, which might be somewhat unintuitive for a webinar, is to invite you to actually log on to the Mentimeter site. I've just chatted you the link, and you can either do it on a separate device or open a browser tab on your current device and click this link, and it will ask you to offer 1 to 3 words that you would use to describe an effective leader. So if you go ahead and put that in, then we'll see kind of real time what that looks like in the cloud. And so I wanted to kind of show you, as you can perhaps see there, what that looks like. So we have a real-time formation. And so what you would do is you would enter a word, for example. I will put in empathy. You submit it, and it will give us a real-time view of the cloud. Actually, and I forgot to introduce Sarah, who is on the call here, who is actually presenting and is part of our team at SIYLI. Sarah will be able to answer any of your questions. I don't know if there's a link, Sarah, you could send to the Mentimeter cloud that's forming so we could show folks.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. We have a Mentimeter link, which we've just popped into the chat box there. So I think just some folks are asking if there's a code. There should be no code needed, just a link. So if you just pop in click on that link, and then you should be able to enter your responses immediately from there. And so hopefully we'll see some results pretty soon. Thanks.
And Sarah, are you able to display the cloud as it's forming, or send me the link?
Yeah, just wait, just one moment. I'll just take a quick look and I'll grab that for it.
And so what this does is it gives you a sense of the people on this call, the participants, what you actually all are thinking real time in terms of your response to this question. So it should be populating, and what we're working on right now is just finding the way to actually display this to you.
Rich, I'm going to just share my screen for one moment, and then I will show you. It's a very populated word cloud. So just one moment. Let me share my screen.
Great. And as many of you can see, there are 98 of you on this call. So as you see the word cloud, 65 of you so far have answered. And as you can see there, it's still forming, now 66. So this is real-time picture of what you are describing as the core leadership qualities that make an effective leader. And as you can see, this is kind of what you're reporting: empathy and compassion. Empathic, so that shows up twice, are kind of primary. So the larger, as you know, the larger a word is, the more people use that word and responded with that. But you could also see some of the other qualities that surround the words in the center. So you see kind, trustworthy, authentic, inspiring, good listener. But what's striking also is that empathy and compassion are right in the center. 70 of you out of 97 have answered. And the reason we like to do this is because this is an actual survey, real time, of your own view on effective leadership. And it's always interesting to see what you believe are the qualities of effective leadership. So thank you for that, Sarah. And if you could stop sharing, then I'll go ahead and continue and share my screen here. And thanks for your patience. We call this technological patience or equanimity as we kind of work out some of these technology methods. So what I also like to point to is that many of the things in that word cloud harnessed the skills of emotional intelligence. And so as you can see here, one of the things that we like to focus on at the Institute is mindfulness-based emotional intelligence. You see mindfulness at kind of the very bottom. In many ways, mindfulness operationalizes emotional intelligence, which we understand as the skills of self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management, and that all of these skills are trainable. So that's a little bit of our work at the Institute and kind of the way we approach the work. But what's important is that also out there in the world, the importance of emotional intelligence is something that's been pointed to, for example, for the future of work. Some of you may be familiar with this research. This comes out of the World Economic Forum, and they published this Future of Work, Future of Jobs report. And for 2022, you see that some of the things that you pointed to are very much on this list. So look at number 2, active learning. And then emotional intelligence is there as well, number 8. Interestingly as well, LinkedIn does a study every year, and this year they said that the skills needed most this year in 2020, especially from a people perspective, as you see there on the left, top 5 include collaboration, adaptability, emotional intelligence, as well as creativity and persuasion. They call them soft skills. I don't always love that term because I think these refer to people skills, and working with people isn't always soft. It can be sometimes quite hard. And so these are people skills, let's call them. And then importantly, of course, for leading and managing, emotional intelligence is a critical set of skills as well. So that's what we kind of have come to learn. That's what the experts say. But what we wanted to do was ask you directly. And that's what we'll be sharing here, which is the outcome of a specific state of emotional intelligence survey that we have sent out. I'm happy to say we had 955 different respondents uh, from a wide variety of organizations. These included technology, consulting, banking, healthcare, training. So a very, very wide number of industries, and then also broad representation from a wide array of countries. I think we had all continents except Antarctica represented, and countries as far ranging and from a broad swath everywhere from Nigeria to Andorra to Jamaica to Brazil and many countries in between. So it's a pretty broad representation. And then the other thing we noticed in this survey is that the folks who responded to it tended to be highly experienced. So a large percentage of the folks, at least 79%, had 10 plus years of experience in organizations. And then another 41% reported having over 20 years of experience in organizations. And so it was quite an experienced group overall in aggregate that responded here. All right, so let's talk about the state of emotional intelligence and what we actually found here. And the first thing I want to offer is the overall theme that organizations are resilient. That is one of the overall themes that we found, but now we can look at the data. I think, interestingly, only 9% of people disagreed with this item, suggesting that their organizations were fulfilling their mission. Only 9% disagreed. That means almost 90 some odd percent agreed or were neutral that their organizations were delivering on their goals. So that means that organizations, by and large, are kind of on task. But here's where it gets interesting. Only 65%, 65% agreed that their workload was increasing. So there's a higher workload in fulfilling this mission at this point in time, which is a really interesting finding. And then the other one was that about 50% of respondents agreed that revenue was also down, so that there were fewer resources to manage this higher workload. So I think a huge takeaway for this, for me at least, is that organizations by and large are doing what they're set out to do, that they're aligned with their goals, yet people are working harder than ever and revenue is down, and so they have fewer resources to manage them. And so the other thing we did was then we asked people on the survey, what are some of the top priorities of your organization? And we gave them 14 different possible priorities that we typically see in organizations. We also created space for them to write in their own answers. So what we found in terms of the top priority for organizations, this might not be surprising to you. The first one, number one, was dealing with uncertainty. Again, not surprising, but then the second one was productivity. And you can start to see how these two might interact. Uncertainty and productivity may pull in opposite directions. We also saw, third, the need for increased leadership skills. Stress and burnout was the next highest concern. And finally, collaboration, the capacity to collaborate well. So again, to highlight here, these findings are ones that you all reported, the participants reported in sort of priority order, being the priorities for their organizations. So part of this suggested to us that emotional intelligence may be very important for the future and for future readiness. But again, rather than just declare this, we wanted to ask survey participants. So what did we find? We found that emotional intelligence, in fact, the importance of emotional intelligence seems to be increasing over time, especially as participants in organizations think about future readiness of their organizations. And one thing I forgot to mention in the previous slide about the demographics of who answered this question, we had about a third of participants from small organizations, but we also had about 20% of participants from large organizations, being 10,000 people or more. So in aggregate, the participants from the surveys from the survey were reporting this. So about 5% of people, if you look at the green bar, only about 5% of participants disagreed that emotional intelligence would be important in the next 12 months. Whereas the green bar on the bottom for agree was at about 85%. And I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind, that the overall kind of theme out of this is that 85% of those participants that we surveyed in those broad organizations around the world agreed that emotional intelligence is important for the future. So what does emotional intelligence have to do with organizational success? That was the next kind of line of inquiry that we wanted to examine. And I want to just offer here, and I should say this by way of a little bit of a disclaimer, that what this data that we're collecting is an observational study. So it was really survey intelligence. We didn't manipulate the data in any way. We didn't try to necessarily run any other analysis than simply take a temperature check of people, their understanding and views on emotional intelligence, and the factors leading to organizational success. So what we did then was we looked at whether people agree that emotional intelligence is important to their organization, which you saw before. And then we also asked them on these indicators of organizational success, about these indicators of organizational success. And these are general indicators. There, of course, can be many more, but these are ones we typically see. And so we kind of put these out and asked people to rank them. And then we compared those to the degree to which they saw the importance of emotional intelligence. So what did we find? We saw that in those who rated emotional intelligence as not being important to their organizations also reported a low degree of agreement that their organizations were successful on those key variables that I just previously showed you. So there's a little bit of a relationship here that looks like it's trending around not valuing emotional intelligence, but also not having organizational success. Perhaps the other way to look at it is from the positive skew or direction. Emotional intelligence, those that reported that emotional intelligence is important to their organizations also reported that they had a high degree of organizational success. Again, the participants reporting they had a high degree of importance attached to emotional intelligence in their organization also agreed that they had high organizational success in their organization. So these are interesting relationships and trend lines. And so I think the important potential takeaway is that emotional intelligence is important if emotional intelligence is important to the organization. It's related to agreement on the success of the organization. So a culture that values emotional intelligence is a culture where participants are reporting there is organizational success. So, and the other thing we wanted to look at, so if we looked at the priorities of organizational success, we also wanted to look at organizational values and the relationship between emotional intelligence and workplace values, as well as skills. So here's what we found. First, we asked people out of a list of 14 core values for organizations, as well as any write-in values. So participants could write in core values of their organizations. Here's what we found, that organizations, participants in these organizations said their organizations valued, number one, performance, number two, collaboration, number three, integrity, number four, technical excellence, and number five, compassionate leadership. And I don't know about you, but this list is quite striking in that performance and technical excellence are things that you might expect an organization would value. But what we see is collaboration, integrity, and compassionate leadership, 2, 3, and 5, are also on the top 5 list of what organizations value at this point in time. And I think that's critical because these are core emotional intelligence skills. and that we actually have the means and the capacity to build these skills. In many ways, this could mirror the word cloud. When we asked you earlier about effective leadership, a lot of you are reporting empathy and compassion and trustworthiness and collaboration. And it also mirrors the priorities of organizations, because here you see collaboration as you did previously in the priorities of an organization. And so, again, it's just really interesting to note. And then we will have plenty of time, by the way, at the end of this presentation to discuss all of this, because we'll open it up for question and answer via chat or simply by raising your hand and unmuting. But I think it's first really useful to see across these dimensions what matters to organizations. Okay, so if those are the things that are priorities and values of organizations, what about skills for team success? This was another set of questions we asked people. And here are the top 5 that participants reported. In terms of the skills that they were seeing for team success, collaboration was number 1, followed by communication and productivity. So, and then adaptability and strategic thinking. So again, on balance, if you look at these different skills, some of these are those people skills, are those human-centered emotional intelligence skills. And then some of them have much more to do with performance and strategic thinking. So on priorities, on values, and then on skills across the board, the one finding that was consistent was collaboration. So organizations prioritize collaboration, organizations value collaboration, and then in terms of the skills that they are seeking to develop, organizations are also looking to develop collaboration first. And then you see the other related skills there as well. So all this is really interesting data. Here's another interesting kind of overall finding that we are seeing, that learning new emotional intelligence skills, that organizations are fairly open to this now at a rate of, participants at least are reporting that organizations, 91% of participants are reporting that organizations are open to developing new EI skills, emotional intelligence skills. They agree with that statement, or at least are neutral to it. And similarly, in terms of sharing emotions, organizations, participants are reporting organizations at 85% agree or are neutral. And I think this latter one is a really interesting finding as well, because if you remember earlier, we said that in the past, emotional intelligence was less important overall as a view as it is in the future, present and future. This may be suggestive of the fact that organizations are more welcoming to authenticity and vulnerability, that having people share their emotions, that there's a different level of openness to that, perhaps now than previously. So I think this is a really interesting finding. So that's all interesting data, but if the idea is that emotional intelligence is a set of skills, and those skills are trainable, how do you go about implementing emotional intelligence? And again, we wanted to ask all the participants, what are the ways that they are doing this in their organizations? So before I dive into the findings, I'm curious for your own self, if you think of your organization, and the organization can be, I know we have participants on here from many different types of organizations. It could be a business, it could be a government agency, it could be healthcare, it could be educational. Whatever your organization is, how are they implementing emotional intelligence skills if they're doing that? I'd invite you to just go ahead and chat that now if you could, and we'll take a look and see what people are saying. EI workshops. Okay, great. What are some other ways that you all are seeing it? Team camps, team building workshops, leadership coaching, not a focus in my company. Yeah. And if you could make sure that you have the all or share, with everyone button selected so we could see that, so that the messages, if you wish to share them with everyone, more and more trainings being offered, not enough yet, but trend looks good. Psychologist consultation trainings, coaching, practice trainings, coaching and online learning. Yeah, that's important to note. We have some data on online and digital learning as well. Nothing that I'm aware of. Webinars and guest speakers, mostly from a health and wellness perspective. Some trainings, yep, with perhaps some assessments related to them. Okay, great, thank you. So it's book clubs, discussion groups. That's also important because perhaps a little less formal. Psychological safety, right? That's kind of a cultural factor. I'm just reading through the chat here. Bringing psychological safety into project management, EI webinars, meaningful staff meetings. So there are ways that you all are sharing here that seem both formal and perhaps informal. That's actually very consistent with some of the results we found. So here are the different ways that we're seeing people bringing in, the participants bringing in emotional intelligence skills into their organization. And as you can see, there's quite a variety of ways. Some have trainings, either focused on mindfulness or directly on emotional intelligence, sometimes a combination of both, as is the case with us. Informal practice sessions. Actually, the one that got the most response was emotional intelligence trainings. And then mindfulness and informal practice sessions. The size of the circle here is a rough approximation of the frequency that we saw these answers. And I think that's important to call out because, as I said earlier, you both see here formal and informal ways that people are bringing emotional intelligence skills into their organization. I also do want to point out something here, that you see a slightly smaller bubble around apps and digital platforms. And what we saw in our study actually was that app usage was at about 17%. So folks bringing in emotional intelligence skills via offering an app was at about 17%. And digital platforms such as Slack and other platforms, learning platforms, was at about 18%. So relatively low as at least reported way that people are bringing emotional intelligence in. The other thing that I wanted to point out is that about 87% of respondents on this series of questions reported that their budget for formal training either remained static or was being cut or decreased across this time, and kind of the very moment when people need these skills more than ever. So I think it's important to note that as part of the context. And to end on a kind of more hopeful note around that as well, based on what you saw in chat and also this data set, there are also ways that folks are bringing in these skills informally. You see the informal practice sessions, the meetups, perhaps the mindfulness practice sessions that are employee-led and self-directed. So that was something that we saw was pretty prominent as well going on right now. And so hopefully that gives some cause for hope because there are ways that immediately people can bring it in if it's not formal. And then I just should probably share with you how we go about working with organizations to bring these skills in. We like to do it kind of at an introductory level first by offering, keynotes or perhaps more modular, shorter form offerings that build the skills of mindfulness and emotional intelligence. For example, we have this adaptive resilience program, and it's much shorter than our core curriculum. The core curriculum is more extensive, that's Search Inside Yourself. And then after people have that experience, we help them with deepening the skills by creating learning sustainment and continuity through our learning platform, which they have access to. They can access the tools, the practices, the research. And then we have other modular workshops that build on the core skills, such as effective teaming. And then finally, when we've seen success in terms of embedding, really scaling the skills of emotional intelligence, the tools, the platforms, we see that happening when we start to move to a train the trainer model, where we take internal employees who we call champions, for the skills of mindfulness and emotional intelligence, kind of teach them the methodology of how to build those skills, again, from that unique perspective that we have here at the Institute, which is combining neuroscience with mindfulness, with the development of core EI. So when we are able to train a cohort internal to an organization and offer this kind of train the trainer approach, then we see EI really scaling within that organizations. And we work with a lot of large organizations and even whole governments. I know we have some friends here from the government of Bhutan and some of the ministries there. We've worked with them all as well. So one of the things, in fact, we want to focus on for that very reason for 2021, and this is a little bit more informational for you all, is that we are going to be offering, launching this week, organizational teacher certification. So this is where we gather those internal champions, those folks who want to experience a train the trainer, and we certify them to teach these core methodologies of science-based mindfulness and emotional intelligence. So we'll give you a link afterwards if you're interested in that. I'm going to start to wrap it up here and then open it up for questions. I know I've been talking for the better part of the hour here. And so here are some of the key themes that we learned from this emotional intelligence survey. There is high openness to learning the skills of emotional intelligence in organizations. There's high need. They're probably informing that openness. Interestingly, perhaps one of the core findings across everything is that based on organizational priorities, on the values of organizations that are reported, and on the skills that organizations are looking to develop, it seems like collaboration is perhaps one of the most critical skills for team success. And that overall, as people reported out about their organizations seem resilient, and that emotional intelligence is becoming important for future readiness, and that there's increasing openness to emotional intelligence. Because importantly, the last sort of conclusion is that when people agree that emotional intelligence is important in their organizations, they also tend to agree that their organizations are seeing success. So again, there's a lot there. And this is only an observational study across a fairly large and robust and diverse sample size. But it is interesting to note the relationship between valuing emotional intelligence and the successful organizational outcomes. Okay, so we will be sending you soon, because we are just finishing off the overall report with the data and so forth, with all the questions, that you'll be able to see all this shortly. If you've registered here as a participant, you'll be getting it automatically, as well as a recording of this session. So look out for that. It's coming soon. And with that, you can certainly reach us at SIYLI.org. You can find out more about us here. And at this point, I want to open it up to see if there's any questions. And we will do that just by simply asking you to either chat in your question or to click on the participant tab and raise your hand. There should be a raise your hand function where you could just click on there. So go ahead and please click on participants, raise your hand, the participants button on your control panel at the bottom, raise your hand, then we'll know you can come off of mute, and we'll know if anyone looks like someone has their hand raised, as well as it looks like there are some questions coming in. So I can't see who has their hand raised. Sarah, do you see that?
Yeah, Rich, it looked like Linda had her hand raised, and it looks like she may have lowered her hand again.
Okay.
Linda, if you wanted to ask a question, please feel free to raise your hand. The other option is, of course, chatting in the question is probably a really easy way. Linda says no question, thank you. Certainly. So it looks like Alexi has a question there as well, Rich, on the tab.
Okay, great. Yeah. Hi, Alexi. Great question. I'm glad you're here also. So with 87% reporting that budgets are declining, what have you found to be the most effective in developing new customer interest for the program? So I can share, this is not formally in the survey, but I can just share more anecdotally the trends that we're seeing here is that people are kind of asking for a little shorter form versions of what we do. Some of the modular offerings, some of the keynotes. You know, I just gave a keynote to a Fortune 100 company to their leaders based in Africa, their executive leadership group, the country and regional managers of Africa. And it was only an hour and 15 minutes, 75 minutes to explore these topics. So they're kind of smaller, if you will, smaller ticket items. That's a very transactional way to put it. I think they're shorter form. And I'm not saying that to be kind of clever. I really do think there's huge value in doing kind of the depth learning. But what we're seeing is requests for shorter forms of learning modules around emotional intelligence or mindfulness or resilience. They tend to be topical. They tend to be kind of much more discrete. And so we've been offering that, and at the same time, I do want to emphasize that we have lots of data, as many of you may know, that kind of the longer form, deeper dive skill building of the core curriculum that happens over multiple sessions and multiple days, supported by the learning management system and follow-on resources and practices. That's what really helps embed the skills. And we've done, that's a separate study. You can ask us about that. We have over 6,000 participants from 15 countries in that study that have found that kind of approach, that longer, deeper approach to be efficacious. Okay, great. There's a bunch of questions coming in here through chat. So let's see. If Sonia, I see you're bummed you missed the webinar, but you will get the recording. So that's great. Did you see any different interest in developing EI by industries, healthcare, etc.? Sarah, I'll give you that one because you were deep in the data. Sarah, by the way, led the vast majority of this work for us here at SIYLI. And so Sarah, I'll kind of punt that one to you and see what you were seeing in the data.
Thanks, Rich. I really appreciate that question. So thank you, Gudrun, for asking us about that. It's really interesting that you mentioned healthcare in particular. Of the industry-based demographics that we received, healthcare was actually number 2 in terms of the strongest response, which was really surprising to us. Not to say, of course, there's definitely an acute need for emotional intelligence right now in healthcare, but certainly we didn't expect to see such a strong response from that industry. So in terms of that particular industry directly, we haven't actually cut the data yet by industry respondents. And for those, of course, who want to know about the other industries we heard from, our number 1 was training. So a lot of HR, L&D professionals responding, healthcare, then consulting, then we had information technology and banking as being our kind of top 5. And so it will be our intention for the report that you're going to receive that we'll kind of take a look at that more granular level in terms of which different industries saw different particular needs or trends. So hopefully, Gudrun, there'll be more answers coming soon to your question on that. Thank you.
Great. A couple of other really interesting questions here. First of all, just quickly, yes, we offer a lot of these trainings, especially the core curriculum, in many different languages. Alvaro, I saw you had a question there, including Spanish. So definitely we have that. Yes, all of these trainings, pretty much all of them, though some in-person ones are coming back. Almost all of them right now are online. And it's interesting for us because we've seen that the online delivery, which we've reformatted, so we've made them more sessions, but shorter sessions, is almost as efficacious as the live in-person training. So for those of you familiar with the new kind of methodology, synchronous and asynchronous learning seem to be tracking very similarly in terms of their efficaciousness. Okay, and then there was a question about this, do we offer this for law enforcement? Interestingly, we actually just finished a pilot with the Los Angeles County Criminal Justice System, where we had Los Angeles Police Department, judges from the Superior Court, prosecutors, public defenders, sheriffs, detention center staff, take these programs, and they found it to be extremely beneficial for and applied to their daily work. So we have been piloting this with law enforcement, and the results seem really great. Okay, so let's see, there's a number of other questions here. Do you have impact studies for the SIY programs delivered online? Yes, we're in the middle of compiling those because we only started delivering SIY programs online in June. So it's only been a few months, but already we've been collecting data, and we've already seen some of the efficacy of it. And that will be something we'll be able to share with you soon, as we're probably going to end out the year and compile all the data from this kind of half a year that we've been running them, and then be able to share that fully. But the numbers are very similar, and they're all high, and they're very similar. So stay tuned for that soon. Let's see. How do you build the process of mindfulness in an organization, pilot pitches to executives, et cetera, et cetera? We do have, so one thing I should share with you all, if you're not familiar, is we have over 700 certified teachers of SIY all over the world, in over 50 countries around the world. And if you go to our website, you can look up the teachers in your region and in your country. And they are very well versed on how to bring in these tools into organizations. Because one of the things we do when we train teachers, and we train, including what we'll be doing with the organizational teacher training, is that we present the business case, we present the outcome metrics, we present different ways that you can position and explain these programs, these tools, and the outcomes. So just kind of go to our site, as you see here, and you can look up in your country and region. What is one piece of advice you have for people who work at toxic organizations where EI is not actively on leaders' radars? That is a wonderful question. It's a very important question too. And I don't mean to be trite here, but we call our institute the Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute for a reason. First of all, it came from Google, so we have the search component, but the critical piece is inside yourself. And so what we first recommend is develop these skills and capabilities for yourself, and then that will help inform you about how you can perhaps skillfully present them within your organization. And so becoming steeped in the tools yourself and using them for your own self to manage that difficult environment, to navigate, is kind of the very first step. We call that embodiment, and it is actually a state and a set of skills that you can develop, and one that we actively teach. I have people all the time say, you know, who could really use this is my spouse or my in-law or my boss. And I always like to remind those folks, like, what's the name of this program? Search Inside Who? And again, this is not sort of a judgment or a value judgment, but it's simply like start from the inside out is basically what I'm saying. Start with your own self, and you'll see what's possible or not possible, because it's not always possible. Despite the encouraging data I shared, it's not always possible. But sensing and gaining insight into how to skillfully do this starts with practicing one's own self. Do you provide company referrals for certified SIYLI teachers? I'm not really sure what that means. We don't aggregate leads and farm them out to our teachers, but we encourage companies to get in touch with our teachers by having them, again, placed on our website, also by location and region.
Rich, it looks like we've also got Marie Isabel has got her hand raised as well. So if
okay, great.
Her, that would be great. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for raising your hand, and please come off mute so we can hear someone else's voice. Please go ahead, Marie Isabel.
Hello, Rich and Sarah. So nice to hear from you and to listen to this great insight from today's meeting. It's really encouraging, and we're happy to see that. So I had a question. I did the training with you guys early July, which was fully online, and I was quite amazed on how we could actually create relation and create really this amazing connection with people, although it was an online training, so that was great. But we were doing the survey before and after, right? And I was wondering, are you also performing this same survey a few months down the line? How much of those people that we have in those trainings are actually sustaining a practice after the month, and how long does it last for them?
Yes. Okay, great. So we do a pre-post assessment of these skills, of course, before and after the programs. Our post assessment tends to happen somewhere in the 4 to 6 week range after the program. Because of our large sample set, we have not done more extensive or longitudinal studies over longer periods of time. But what we do have is quite a robust case study from our largest client, which is SAP. You'll be familiar with that, a lot of you, which is it's a multinational software company headquartered in Germany. They have over 100,000 employees. They operate in over 180 countries around the world. And they have been running this curriculum every week since really the summer in their company. So they literally have thousands of folks who go through this. So a while back, they did a study about exactly the question you're asking, Marie Isabel. Over a period of time, people who practice these skills, what kind of impact is it having for them? And so they did a study pre-post and then a second post analysis 6 months after they had taken these programs. And they found that for those that continued to maintain and utilize the tools, which were offered to them, they saw even more added benefits on indexes like wellness, employee engagement, meaningful work, decreases of stress, increases in collaboration, in creativity, and in relationship management. And so that's about a 6-month period out. And again, it's just one case study in like one company, although a large one that uses this a lot. And I think the sample size was approximately 650 employees of that company. And I know that they're in the middle of doing a much bigger study, same methodology, similar methodology, except adding a control group. So it'll be even more rigorous. And they're preparing it for peer publication review and peer review in a published journal, but it's forthcoming, and that's thousands of employees. And I think we're thinking that the results are going to be similar. So that's kind of the state of the kind of more extensive long-term research, but we really just look at the kind of 4 weeks out post.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else want to raise your hand or have other questions? Let me see if there's anything here. Okay. Yes, no, we didn't see specific segmentation from for-profit to nonprofit in this survey. And I don't think I see any other questions. Sarah, do you see anything else on chat?
Yeah, we did have a question from Tahira earlier on, which was about how we might position emotional intelligence to different clients. So the examples that she's offered here include things like burnout, stress management, resilience. Do you have any advice you'd like to offer around that specifically?
Yeah, and so on many different indicators, I mentioned the SAP study, but also if you request our impact study, you'll see that on many different dimensions of performance and well-being, the skills of mindfulness and emotional intelligence have a positive impact. So for example, the ability to manage conflict, the ability to navigate stress, the ability to manage aspects of burnout, or more broadly, wellness, are all positively impacted by the development of mindfulness and emotional intelligence skills. And like I said, we have an impact study that points to some of the impacts on those dimensions. And again, you know, it's a pretty broad study because we have a sample size of about 6,000 plus people who participated in that across 15 countries. And so it's an interesting data set. What I would say is that it seems like, because I have to be sort of like very upfront about and transparent about the research, right? it seems like from our study, there seems to be positive impacts. The studies are observational in nature, so they're not necessarily fully predictive. However, they do seem to establish that there is some relationship between these skills and those factors of wellness, such and resilience. Yes, and you can see here the impact study can be downloaded at the link here. Okay, any other questions or comments or observations? Follow up to Isabel's question, what's clear that what % of participants chose to continue to use the skills? Yes, so there is a drop off for sure. I don't know the exact number, but there was a fair amount of drop off. But there was also a fair number. I wish I had the number at the top of my head, but I don't. But what was also interesting was that there were quite a number of people that continued to use those skills. And then I think also importantly, in that particular organization and that particular kind of use case, there is a kind of ongoing set of resources around the SIY programs that are available to people. So there's sort of these informal channels that we talked about, things like meetups, things like coaching that are become available to certain of those participants. And so I think it's a really good question, and I think it's also supported by a number of other informal factors in the organization. Yes, the answer is this was looking at employees who had the opportunity to take the 2-day program. And when we say 2-day program, that's changed a little bit, right? With COVID, like I said, everything is on SIY online. Right now, it's a roughly 12-hour program divided sometimes over 6 sessions of 2 hours each, for example. But yes, to answer your question, Linnell, the data that we have is for people who took the full core curriculum. We also have some efficacy data for the modular offerings, but the most robust data set, which we've been collecting for up to 7 or 8 years now, has been about the core curriculum program. Okay, great. I don't think there's any other questions or comments. So with that, I want to thank you for your time and your attention today, and encourage you to be in touch with us. If you haven't signed up for our newsletter, that's a great way to just keep tabs on new developments, new initiatives like this, new studies or blogs that we publish. So please do stay in touch. Hope this is useful for you. Again, you'll be getting a copy of the actual report once we finally finish compiling it all and formatting it and sending it to you. You'll be getting a copy of this recording. Thank you again for your time today, and please stay in touch and be well. Thanks, everybody.